Okay, so I think we're live. So welcome everyone to Climate Conversations. I'm Karina Weinstein, and I'm the Program Strategy and Innovation Director at FXB USA. I have the privilege to lead the FXB Climate Advocates Program that informs, empowers, and mobilizes youth to address the climate crisis. And as part of our Climate Conversation series, we'll be talking to FXB Climate Advocates alumni from around the world on their climate stories and the change they're creating in their communities. So today I'm very honored to be with Mercedes Asamani. So Mercedes, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Mercedes Asamani, like you said. I'm from Ghana, and I joined the FXB climate program last year. Last year, and I work with the All African Student Union, the Environment and Climate Working Group. So the All Africa Student Union is the mother body, students body for all African students, both in Africa and outside Africa. And I work on the climate and environmental working group as the deputy committee chair. Currently, I'm in the Michigan Technological University pursuing my Ph.D. in energy and environmental policy. And joining the FSB program has changed a lot, especially in my advocacy and knowledge on climate change, and also contributed to me applying for the PhD in energy and environmental policy, just to deepen my knowledge on climate policies and better effect change in my community as well.
Thank you so much, Mercedes, for that introduction. Tell us a little bit about growing up in your community in Ghana, what it was like. Did you learn about climate change and the environment? And did you see any impacts of climate change growing up in your community?
So growing up in Ghana, luckily for me, we had a farm, a home garden kind of, and that kind of boosted my interest in climate issues. So we had our own backyard garden where we grew our own food, and we grew a lot of stable crops as well. So we didn't, the only things we had to buy outside was meat. So, and even with meat, we had a piggery, a small piggery and poultry to at least take care of that as well. So growing up, having these in the house inspired my interest in everything environment and nature. So I've been really particular about everything environment and nature. Unfortunately, things have changed now. People no longer really prioritize home gardening and all. Recently, there's been few advocacies here and there to get people to go back to home gardening, just to contribute to food security and even save foods, because there are several issues of adulterated foods on the Ghanaian market. You are not so sure what you're buying because you don't even know what it's made of. So recently there's been some advocacies back on home gardening. So growing up and having our own home gardens, seeing other community members also grow their own food, inspired interest. But like I said, things have changed. I don't know whether it's urbanization that has changed some of these things, because now people would rather buy. A lot more people are paving their compounds instead of growing food, despite there being laws in the country that directs that at least 40% of your compound should be bare, away from the fact that it could be used for home gardening to allow for ease penetration of water into the soil, to also reduce the incidences of flooding. But a lot of people don't even go by these. So that's just a bit of the picture growing up and how things are now.
What was your favorite fruit or vegetable that you grew in your garden growing up?
My favorite food has always been mango. We had a lot of mangoes in the house, so I've always loved mango. I still love mango, just that my preferences have changed now. We grew the smaller mangoes but now I prefer the big, I don't know what's the difference. I don't know the difference in the name, but mango remains my favorite, but the bigger sized ones.
Thank you. And you said that things have changed over time, urbanization, and people grow their food less. Have you witnessed any changes in the climate over time in your community and maybe more broadly in Ghana?
Yeah, there's been some changes in the climate as well, coupled with changes in our attitudes towards the climate, and even growing our own food to support food security and all. A lot of things have changed, like I mentioned, away from food, away from the climate, our attitudes have changed. I remember growing up, we barely used plastics. We were almost using either calabash bowls and pots. People would prefer going to buy their porridge in their calabash pots or bowls or bottles. And we barely used plastic. Foods were mostly packaged in leaves and other sustainable packaging options. But these days, our attitudes have changed. Our attitudes toward home garden has changed, and the climate itself has changed. There was a recent research on cashew growth in some parts of Ghana that I was a part of. And speaking to some of the cashew farmers and even cocoa farmers, we realized that the climate has changed to the point that it does not really support some of these crops anymore. So now the Food and Agri Department has to come up with different varieties of the seeds to adapt to the changing climate. So there's been some changes in the climate, and there's been some changes in people's attitudes towards climate issues as well.
Thank you. Tell us about your time at university and why you decided to join the All African Students Union.
So during my undergrad university education, I was privileged to contest for the National General Secretary of the National Union of Ghana Students, which I won. So from that, and when I was pursuing my graduate education, my master's in public administration in the University of Ghana, I had worked with the Executive Secretary General of the All African Students Union, His Excellency Peter Koji, during my days in the National Union of Ghana Students. So I was recommended because of my interest in environmental issues and also my experience in working with student groups to serve on the All African Students Union Climate and Action Working Group. So that's how come I got to work with the team.
Tell me a little bit about the Climate Action Working Group. What are some of the issues that you're discussing? What are some of the policy recommendations that the working group puts forward?
So one of the important policies that the working group is really concerned about is climate education. We believe that at the center of climate change is capacity building. If people don't have the capacity or the knowledge to effect change, both techno-managerial skills as well as the knowledge to influence policies, advocacies, and even attitudes, then the whole climate agenda would bear no fruit. So at the core of the climate working groups advocacy is climate education and how government institutions all over Africa can involve student groups as well as youth organizations in policy making regarding climate education by bringing in climate change topics into the educational curriculums in the various schools, right from basic school level and to including the youth and student organizations as well as youth organizations in some of their stakeholder engagement, because we always say in Africa, we always say the youth are the future leaders, but I believe that climate change, the effect of climate change transcends generations, and as young people, we have to take action today. So at the core of our activities is climate education, and a little bit centered also on nature-based solutions and how we can get young people involved, especially in tree planting.
Yeah, the climate education definitely resonates with FXB because that's really why the program was started, was because we heard from young people all over the world, including, very developed countries like the United States or parts of Europe, where young people said, we're not learning enough about climate change. We're not learning about climate change in a comprehensive, intersectorial, interdisciplinary way. And that's really the gap that FXB Climate Advocates Program is trying to fill. Can you tell me what are some specific kind of policy recommendations within both climate education and nature-based solutions? What is the state of climate education in Ghana, for example, today? Is there a climate curriculum?
So currently there's no climate curriculum, but these are recommendations that have been made to the government, and it's currently under review by the Ministry of Education. Away from there being a specific climate change curriculum, previously components of our social studies touched on the environment and aspects of the integrated science education as well, but it wasn't as in-depth as a climate change curriculum would do. So several policy considerations and has been made to the Ministry of Education, and currently the government is considering introducing a climate change curriculum right from the basic level to the tertiary level, because as mentioned, capacity building is the core component in achieving our climate change objectives, because if people do not have any knowledge on what this is about and what they are expected to do, then they wouldn't know what or how to effect any change. So there's been policy considerations. The government is doing its best, particularly regarding curriculum introduction from the basic level till tertiary level. And on the nature-based solution, the Environmental Protection Agency, coupled with other ministries relevant stakeholders, have yearly projects targeted at tree planting and also managing mangroves and all. So there are governmental institutions that are committed to that, and yearly they have projects targeted in that direction. So that's basically what's happening now.
And are you still on the working group? Is it something that, even though you're not in the university, or other students are on it now that you've graduated?
I'm still on the working group. I'm still on the working group, and recently, before last year's COP, we even had a pre-COP summit in Ghana where student organizations from all over the world, we partnered with the Global Student Forum, where they came in and also made policy suggestions, which was presented at last year's COP. In this year's COP too, we've been tasked to interview some youth organizations focused on the climate change agenda, so that we can put together a draft and then present it at the UAE COP28. So I still work remotely with a team, even though I'm here.
Thank you. Tell me about how you learned about the FXB Climate Advocates Program, and why did you decide to join? What were you looking for? What interested you in the program?
So I've always been interested in climate issues, but until joining the FXB, I wasn't particularly sure the direction I was heading. So I chanced on a Ghanaian climate advocate's post on LinkedIn when she graduated from the FXB program last 2 years. So immediately I saw it, I was like, this is a great opportunity and it's free. If I can learn something, network with like-minded people at no cost, why not? So from seeing her celebration of her graduation on LinkedIn, I followed the page on LinkedIn, and then when applications were opened, I applied, and it's been very helpful because now my thoughts on climate issues are not all over the place. Now it's become a very defining moment, even in pursuing my PhD, because the fact that I had a background knowledge in climate change also influenced my knowledge on how this is going to translate into my research interests and other school activities. And it helped me put in a good application too for school. And now I'm here for a PhD in energy and environmental policy. So it's been very helpful. I've learned a lot. I would say it was the first structured knowledge on climate change that I gained, despite me having to do a model in environmental sustainability during my master's degree. Ph.D. program was the first well-structured climate change program that I ever had.
Thank you. What advice would you give to the new participants that will be starting this Saturday? We have a group of about 150 new advocates that are starting our fall 23 cohort. What advice would you give to them to make them advantage of the program?
I would tell them to make good use of the opportunity. Such opportunities are rare. And the fact that it's free, people are having to pay for courses and professional certificates in some of these programs. And I don't think they even get as much as we get from the climate FSB program, because it touches on almost everything on the climate change agenda. And it's a very good opportunity for you to learn about almost everything. And then from there, streamline where your interests would align. And then you can pursue a career or even influence your advocacy from there. One particular model I was really happy that it was part of our program, the FSB program, was the model that taught us how to negotiate. Because in all these knowledge, capacity building, your ability to negotiate at important tables would result in you making real change in the end. So I would ask them not to think of this as a mere or one of those opportunities that just comes and goes, but then a rare opportunity and privilege for them to learn about climate change, every aspect of it, network with people, and also from there, be able to know where they are headed in the climate change agenda.
Thank you. I think you're referring to the climate lobbying session, which is always, it's the most interactive, and it could be hard, on Zoom to take on a role and to speak, but I've heard from many participants that's one of the most impactful sessions. So that's really wonderful to hear. Tell me a little bit about your climate action project. I believe you worked with Market Women. Tell us about why you had that idea, what you did, and some of the impact from that project.
So I focused on Market Women because I realized that a lot of times doing a lot of the advocacy projects I've seen from climate NGOs and even the government, it's always targeted at the, I don't want to, maybe upper class or a few people who are literate and all. But the real problem, especially in the plastic waste management, are people at the bottom or at the grassroots who barely have any idea how their actions even impact the environment. In our market centers, plastic usage is significantly high, and I would say that it contributes significantly to our plastic waste in the country. However, little advocacy projects target these women or centers to educate them on the impact of their plastic usage on the environment. So I tried to take that opportunity and also fill that gap by going to the market centers. I chose Medina Market, which is one of the biggest markets in the country, so that I get to speak to these women, know their knowledge, assess their knowledge on climate issues, particularly plastic waste and how it impacts the environment, and also use the opportunity to educate them as well. And a lot of them had no idea the impact of their actions on the environment, and we're really grateful that for such an education. And I believe that that project would result in a lot of these women doing better, because there are other packaging solutions like packaging in papers. Some had these old newspapers that they were packaging in, but they were packaging them and still put them in black polythene bags. So I hope that the education that they were given will result in a significant decrease in plastic waste from the market centers, and hope that other organizations will also take this up and involve these women, because if at the center of climate education, we should consider inclusion. And if we are considering inclusion, then all these people have to be at the table, have to know how their actions result or impact the environment, so that in return, in effect, they can also do better and educate other people to also do better.
Thank you. What did you hear from the women in the market? What kind of things did they tell you? And is there like a specific impact of climate change on women?
Yeah, as climate change impacts everybody, and women and children are one of the vulnerable populations of the world that would be particularly impacted should anything go wrong in our ecosystem. And considering the fact that in Ghana, I think women outnumber men by a little percentage. So if women and children are at risk of, or are part of a vulnerable population that stand the risk of bearing the brunt of climate change, then these are people that are also supposed to be considered in engagement, so that they know or have the knowledge on these issues to better impact. And from my interactions with them, a lot of them said that it's the customers who come in to make the purchases who insist on getting these bags. Because left to them alone, they wouldn't even want to invest in buying plastic bags. In Ghana, the market system is such that market women are responsible for buying these plastic bags for the customers. So some customers have no sense of responsibility at all to come to the market with sack bags or even basket to purchase, knowing very well that these market women will eventually package their items for them in plastic bags. So after educating them on the environmental effects of these plastic bags, they made me know about the fact that it was the insistence of these customers that got them to purchase these bags, because these bags even come at extra cost to them, which is not really covered in the sale of the produce or item they are getting to the customers. So I also implored them that since they have now acquired the knowledge of the effect of these plastic bags, they can further educate the customers who come to purchase from them on the need to come along with their sack bags, with their baskets, which used to be a thing in Ghana. Previously, people would go to the market with baskets, with sack bags. But these days, because they know they would have access to free plastic bags anyway, they wouldn't do that. So I implored them to further educate these customers on the impact of these plastic bags on the environment and the need for them to do better by coming to make purchases with their own baskets and other sustainable packaging solutions.
Thank you. Yeah, the use of plastics, I think globally is just so ubiquitous. And like you said, I think for the sellers, the vendors in the market, it would be beneficial for them not to have to buy these bags, but then you have to educate the consumer. So there's like a whole ecosystem. It's just not as simple, but definitely really important. It's amazing how I think plastics is one of those issues that's really universal, developing country, regardless of where you are, just the prevalent use of plastic is a really, big concern, and its impact on the environment. And there are very few municipalities in the United States that have banned plastic bags, and it's been controversial, and more are doing so, but it's such an uphill battle, something as simple as like banning plastic bags, but that would have such a large impact on the environment. So what an amazing project. Tell me a little bit about your PhD. Why did you decide to pursue a PhD and in this topic, and what are you going to research, and what do you hope to do after you're done as Dr. Asamani?
So my interest in climate issues made me want to pursue the energy and environmental policy doctorate at Michigan Tech. So the energy and environmental policy at the center of climate issues is the conversations on alternate energy sources and also the environmental challenges that come with climate change. And that's why I decided to pursue that. And having a background in public policy, a degree or a doctorate degree in energy and environmental policy would better help me to impact both industry and academia. My research interests would be in renewable energy transitions. I realized that electrical energy is a thing here in the US and even in Michigan. So, and I have always thought on the lines of solar energy, probably because of where I'm coming from and it's been in abundance. But coming here, I realized that the climates are different. So more focus on solar energy may not yield the necessary impact as electrical energy would. So in my research interest being on sustainable energy transitions, I'm hoping to focus on electrical energy transitions. I'm still in talks with my advisor on what my final project would be. But after this, honestly, I'm not so sure whether I'm working in industry or academia. Hopefully along the line, I'll be able to know where I'm headed from here. But either ways, I'm hoping that this degree would help me better impact and contribute to the climate change agenda.
Thank you. And I think in the US, there's a big focus on electric vehicles and electric energy, which is really important, but not so much discussion also on the kind of the dark side of the transition to electric energy and where the batteries come from and where does lithium get mined. And so that's a whole kind of area that's just not in the public agenda in the United States at all, which I find, very interesting and really important, because if we can't solve one big problem by creating a whole other environmental problem, right? So so that's a really interesting area. I wanted to ask you, you said that you attended COP27, right? As part of the last year?
No, I couldn't attend COP27. However, we organized a pre-COP summit in Ghana for all, in conjunction with the Global Student Forum for student groups and youth organizations in the climate change space prior to COP. I couldn't make it to COP because of other work assignment. But this year I'll be going to COP, kind courtesy. I'm reading a program this semester on advanced climate and energy policy, and as part of the benefits in the program, I get to attend COP this year. So I'd rather be attending COP this year, and I'm hoping to learn. We have a project we're supposed to be focusing on, and I want to focus on climate education policies in the UNFCCC regime and how far they have come with conversations, what commitments have been made by state parties, and what lies ahead. So that's just about it for this year's COP.
That's wonderful. Will you be as part of this class that you'll be attending? Do you have any scheduled presentations or opportunities to present?
We have some stands in the blue zone, and we have opportunities to present on both, especially on climate justice. Selections haven't yet been done, but as participants, we all have the opportunity to present if we would want to. So hopefully when we get there, we're able to do something and also engage in other side events that would happen.
Yeah. What do you think, what message would you send to global leaders kind of preparing for Conference of Parties 28 about the role of young people in addressing climate change? What do you think there should be more of at these conferences, or what results do you want to see?
I want to see more youth engagement policies, centered policies, because a lot of times when these leaders meet, they forget about the youth component in all of these, and the fact that beyond their leadership, the youth of today will bear the most brunt of the effects of climate change. I expect to see more youth-centered policies. I expect to see more opportunities for youth engagement. I expect to see country commitments to give reserving support for youth organizations and youth climate activists on climate change committees and all to contribute to stakeholder engagement. And I expect to see more investment towards capacity building, especially on climate change and of the youth in particular. So that's what I expect to see. I think in Glasgow, there were several conversations on climate education, but a little effort have been put into it by state parties. I'm hoping to see more effort and more investment towards these because, like I mentioned earlier, at the center of this agenda is capacity building. If there are not a lot of people who have the knowledge and skills, we would be running around in circles and not yield any results. So these are what I expect to see in COP28.
Thank you. You mentioned climate justice. Can you define it for us? What is climate justice?
So on reading some of the principles of the UNFCCC, one of the principles that come up is the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, which is supposed to recognize and ensure equity. And I believe at the core of climate justice is the ensurance of equity and acknowledgement of the fact that despite climate change and its effects being a global concern, we have different responsibilities towards the agenda, especially the fact that developed countries tend to contribute more to global emissions, but developing countries tend to suffer the brunt more. So in this conversation on common but differentiated responsibilities, which results in the perseverance of equity and assurance of equity and climate justice, several conversations in Africa currently, I think at the recently held African Climate Summit, was around the introduction of carbon taxes so that developed countries get to pay these taxes to support developing countries who are more vulnerable to the climate change effect, yet though contributing less to the menace. So climate justice or equity, climate justice seeks to ensure equity and seeks to preserve the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities by recognizing different roles and responsibilities in the climate agenda and to ensure international cooperation as well, because if a party is contributing more to global emissions, it's only right that that party also contributes more through carbon taxes to support the other parts of the world that are likely to suffer the brunt of these emissions. And in doing these, justice will be upheld and also equity ensured as well.
Thank you. And so I guess in that lens, what do you think about the loss and damage, I guess, commitments that were made at COP27? And do you see them actually being put into practice? And do you think it's effective?
I don't think they have been put into practice because at the recently held African Climate Summit, some of the arguments that were advanced were the fact that the proposed figure at Glasgow has still not even been met, and they think it's not feasible enough. That's how come at their recent engagement they agreed on I think $30 billion. Is it $30 million or $30 billion as a commitment towards climate carbon taxes? So a lot of these commitments are made, but the UNFCCC regime is such that it's made up of sovereign states who can't really be legally bounded by these commitments. We can only advocate for cooperation amongst these states parties because these are sovereign countries who, despite assenting to some of these commitments, have the choice and option to either do or draft national policies in line with these or not. So I don't think some of these commitments have been met as desired, but I believe that constant conversations on the need for cooperation among state parties in dealing with the climate change menace would help result in some of and feasible and realistic commitments would help in some impact in the agenda.
Yeah, that is like a nice symbolic commitment, but well, it has to still, we have to see the funds actually right be done. And like you said, no one can really enforce the nation states to do it, but hopefully the public pressure and will help. And so I'm really excited that you're going to be in the US for the next number of years, and hopefully you can get more involved with FXB. Do you have any plans to explore any natural, beautiful environment in Michigan now that you're there?
I have plans. I've been to a few places in Houghton, Mount Bohemia. I've seen the Lake Superior and a few places. I have plans of exploring more because on some of these trips, you get to realize the issues on ground and which could even impact your research as well. Recently, we had a grad retreat at Mount Bohemia, and coming from the retreat, some of the conversations was on the U.S. Car ownership menace, where people would rather own cars and less investment towards public transportation, and how some of these contribute to carbon emissions. And so some of these conversations come up when you go on some of these trips, and which would also help shape up your research interest. I was in New York last week. I'm hoping to still work with the FXB while I'm here. I think joining the program has enlightened me a lot, and I would also want to contribute back in any way that I can. So I'm available to contribute in any way that I can to the FXB while here.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. For example, I'm thinking of a few young alumni we have from Ghana who could really benefit, I think, from your experience and expertise to get guidance, as well as just any of our current participants or alumni who are interested in clean energy and environmental policy. Maybe you could serve as a mentor to some students who are focusing on those areas, because I think your work is really interesting. And what an amazing experience that you're doing a PhD and you're going to be in the US. I think it's really going to help you get, of course, new skills, but also just from your peers, right, and different perspectives to bring back to Ghana to really create systemic change. Because that for climate change, there's no more tweaking at the edges. We really have to dramatically shift the whole system, the entire system, how we use energy, the kind of energy we use, the kind of economic system we have. So I think what you're researching and what you're studying is really critical. I think without a transition to renewable energy in a way that's just and equitable, I don't think we can really, right, mitigate climate change. So, I mean, we have to get off fossil fuels, whether we like it or not, but certainly to do it in a way that's equitable. And the US has some interesting, I'll send you some recordings from the Harvard Climate Summit that happened in, I don't remember when, it was in May, and they had a panel on, it was on the like maybe the community part of climate change. And the reason I thought of you is because there was a woman representing a union of automakers from Michigan. And she said that if you tell her that her union members the words just transition, they'll just hang up on you, because to them, or maybe they were coal miners or some industry that directly contributes, because, to them, anything that moves away from that means loss of jobs. So the second and I think being in Michigan, and obviously with the automakers, that could be an interesting, it's just where it's really like there is some zero sum to it, right? If we don't need to mine more coal, so we can move off fossil fuels, but that does mean some communities lose jobs or cars. And obviously all these companies have made really big, also at the Harvard Climate Summit, there was an executive from General Motors who talked about their really ambitious commitments around electric vehicles. So it's interesting to examine just kind of what these large car makers are, how they're responding to this really real public pressure around the transition to electric energy. And so, yeah, it's very interesting. So I think it's so exciting that you're in Michigan and the US to get perspective. I do know that Ghana needs you, and I hope you go back and train the next
Definitely.
generation of doctors of clean energy and environmental policy, because the world needs people like you with research and experience and community experience to do this. Because a lot of times, like with policy or research, it could look really great on paper, but like you can envision the faces of these women in the market, right? Like, there's a reality on the ground that's really important, right? To be mindful of, to take into account. Yes, it's really powerful. Well, thank you so much, Mercedes. I'm really inspired by the work that you do. We'll certainly lean on you, especially now that you're in the US and in the same time zone. That makes it all much easier, and to learn from you and keep sharing your achievements with us as well. And hopefully I will get to see you. I will be attending COP28 the second week.
Oh, okay.
So I can
I'll
see
also
you
be
there.
coming the second week as well.
Oh, perfect. So I look forward to meeting you there, but let me know beforehand if you're in New York. And this is really wonderful. We'll stay in touch. Thank you so much, Mercedes. I
Thank
really
you
enjoyed
too.
our
Thank
conversation,
you.
and good luck with your studies. I know PhD is intense, but I think you're
Very.
enjoying it, right? Oh, yeah. And so it's really exciting that you're going to be Dr. Asamani. And that's what we'll call you. You have to say doctor, only doctor. Just keep looking forward to the day you could tell everyone, call me doctor. It will all be worth it.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
the opportunity to also share and learn. I think you've made some valid point. You've opened my eyes to several areas that I can channel my energy and even research into, especially on the automobile industry in Michigan, and how transitioning to clean energy or electrical vehicle usage is, and the conversations around it. It's something I'd want to look into later. So thank you very much for this conversation. And
Thank
thanks for the
you.
opportunity.
Of course. Have a great day. Thank you
You
so much.
too.
Bye.